The LA Kings returned from the break with a big victory, and more importantly, Drew Doughty was a big part of it. Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings joins us to discuss that, plus what to expect at the trade deadline, all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On LA Kings, Eddie Garcia. And Eddie, a great resumption from the break. A big win over Utah HC, and more importantly for the Kings, Drew Doughty, kind of the catalyst for a lot of that success. How important was it to get him back and back into the swing of things?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Defensively, I don't know that they had a big drop-off without him, which is surprisingly the case. But Vladislav Gavrikov, who's a UFA at the end of the year, is making himself quite a bit of money this season. They switched him over from being on the second pairing on the left side to the top pairing on the right side, which I don't think any of us saw coming. And he has absolutely killed it. He's been maybe the Kings MVP this year. And as a result, Drew Doughty has kind of lost his spot. He's not on the top pairing anymore. He is still running the number one power play unit, but he's now on the second pairing. So, statistically overall, I don't know that the defense is going to be looked at as that much better, but having Drew Doughty back obviously does make the defense stronger. His presence on the ice, his enthusiasm, his leadership, certainly were all missed to a point. But to have that kind of added, so to speak, for the stretch run now going into the playoffs, obviously is big. And, we all wondered with him coming back from the fractured ankle in the preseason, how he was going to respond. And they kind of threw him really into the deep end of the pool. They were playing him 24, 25 minutes a night. He was struggling a bit to start, which I think is understandable. But the last couple of games before the break for the Four Nations, he looked a lot better. And then I think he looked great at the Four Nations face-off. And I think that's really energized him, kind of like a hyper kind of training camp situation for him. And I think he came back, obviously, in the first game against Utah, had a goal, 2 assists, looked great, was the number one star. So having him back, obviously, is a big deal. And I think that he's, you talk about players who didn't get the rest for the Four Nations. He's an example of the opposite of a player who really benefited from the Four Nations face-off.
Yeah, getting him more work and getting him back into game shape, I think, definitely a benefit. You mentioned the power play and Doughty being the quarterback of the top unit. They're ranked 29th in the league right now. How important is getting Doughty back integrated into the power play to improving it possibly?
I think it's definitely a part of it. It's been probably the biggest disappointment for the Kings this year, certainly from a team standpoint. Defensively, they're very good. They've got the defense to be a team that's going to be tough to play against in the playoffs. They need just a little bit more offense, whether that comes in the form of a couple of players stepping up their game or whether it comes in the power play improving. So the Kings on the road are the worst power play team in the NHL. At home, though, they're middle of the pack. Now, they close out the season with 18 of 28 games on home ice, where, oh, by the way, they're 18-3-2 this year. Best winning percentage on home ice of any team. So I think the hope is with Doughty coming back and with a lot of games on home ice, hopefully that power play can feel a lot better, look a lot better as they go down the stretch run and get into the postseason. And I know we're going to touch on it in a bit, but I'm sure they're looking to add a player to help the power play out as well.
You talked about the discrepancy on home ice. Any thoughts as to why?
No. And the players and coaches have been asked about it, and they don't have an answer either. And it's one of those weird things. You see it all the time for no real, it's like the Dallas Stars, for example, are not very good at home for some weird reason, and they're great on the road. Why is that? I have no idea. It's very odd, but you see it all the time in the NHL. For some unexplained reason, a team will be really, really great on the road or at home, and then not so good opposite. So the Kings are one of those teams on the road, average, at home though, unbelievable. And like I said, with all those home games coming up the rest of the way, because they started the season on a 7-game road trip. They were having renovations at their arena. So in the end, that was tough to start, but they survived it okay. And now they're having the benefits of it here at the back end, going into the playoffs, hopefully, playing all those home games, probably playing well. That should help them, I would think, going down in the postseason.
Big game coming up against Vegas Golden Knights. You have 3 games in hand on Vegas. How important would a regulation win be?
It would be huge. These are those 4-point games that you have within the division. They've played twice this year. They've each won on home ice. They'll meet one more time after this game on Monday. That'll be in Vegas. And yeah, the Kings have played the fewest games of any team in the NHL. So there is the opportunity to make up some ground, but that would certainly start, I think, with that home game against Vegas. The earlier game where they met him, I was there, and it was actually the same night that the Dodgers clinched the World Series. So it was, and they beat Vegas pretty handily in that game. It was a huge party. I don't know that I've been at a hockey game where there was as much of a party celebrating, atmosphere, because they, in between the second and third period, they had the game up on the Jumbotron, and we saw the final out, and the crowd went wild, and it was a very unique situation. But no, it's a big game. Obviously, Vegas has kind of been the standard here in the Pacific since they've come into the league, which is wild when you really think about it. I know you and I have been watching hockey for a while, and we remember when expansion teams couldn't dream of doing something like this.
No.
It's really an amazing story for them. Very curious to see how they adjust to life without Shea Theodore, who of course was injured in the Four Nations. I'm sure they're going to do something at the deadline, because they always do, but it's always a pretty fun matchup against the Golden Knights, and really looking forward to a big game on Monday.
The trade deadline is now just a few weeks away. You mentioned helping the power play as one possibility. What do you think the Kings specifically are looking to add, and what are they willing to give up?
Yeah, I think it's interesting for the Kings. I think it's clearly one position and one situation they're looking to upgrade, and not really anything else. And that's a right-handed shot, a forward who can play right wing and help on the power play and help offensively. The Kings are great in goal with Darcy Kemper. People may not know he's had a really, really comeback year this year. He's 4th in the league in goals against average and save percentage. The Kings are 5th in the NHL in fewest goals allowed per game. They're tied for the fewest total goals allowed. So defensively and goaltending, the Kings are good. They're fine. It's just getting a little bit more offense. If they can get 3 goals per game, they're a pretty tough team to beat. But right now they're under that threshold. So they have a ton of left-hand shots in their forward group, and on their power play, I think the only right-handed shot might be Drew Doughty now that he's back. So it's from what I've been told, when you have too many left-hand shots on your power play, it makes it a lot easier for the other team to defend kind of one side of the ice. So if they can find a right-hand shot that can help them a little bit offensively, play in their top 6 and help on the power play, they would love that. I know some of the names that have been floated out there, and who knows if they're even available, but Jonathan Marchessault, his name has certainly come up in Nashville, Alex Tuck in Buffalo, Oliver Bjorkstrand in Seattle, maybe a Ricard Raquel in Pittsburgh, maybe Brock Besser, who's a UFA at the end of the year, although I don't know if they'd want it. Vancouver's still in the mix.
Right.
And certainly that's an in-division trade, so that's unlikely. But I know, and you as an Islanders fan, I've mentioned this before, Kyle Palmieri is a name that's been floated out there again. So there's seems to be a group of targeted players, and the Kings will have about $5 million to spend. Those guys all make around $5 million, so it seems to be a fit. As far as players that could be going the other way, the Kings have a really nice young defenseman named Jordan Spence, who his name keeps coming up. They also have a young defenseman named Brant Clark, who's kind of looking to get maybe more minutes, and there's a fit there on the right side where if they did trade Spence, then Clark could come in and take those minutes and get more playing time and help his development. So that's what the Kings are looking at. Very specific, right-handed forward to help them out on their power play and hopefully give them a little bit more offensive punch. If that's available, that's what they're looking for.
Well, we're going to find out what, if anything, takes place. It's, like I said, less than 2 weeks away now. So we're looking forward to that. Eddie, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Well, just make sure you search LA Kings so that you don't get, a Sacramento basketball team that you might not be interested in. But, any kind of a search for Locked On LA Kings, and certainly you'll find the YouTube channel, you'll find the podcast. And as far as me, I would say just follow the Locked On LA Kings sites wherever you on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, and they even have me on TikTok now, Gil. God help me. I have to learn about this now. But I'm going to try and see what I could do. But Locked On LA Kings, anywhere on social media is where you can find it.
All right, Eddie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.